In the misty darkness of a Mississippi crossroads, a young man clutches his guitar, waiting. The clock strikes midnight, and a shadowy figure emerges from the gloom. In that moment, Robert Johnson, a struggling musician, makes a fateful choice that will echo through the ages. Legend has it that on that night, Johnson sold his soul to the devil in exchange for unparalleled musical talent. Whether you believe in such tales or not, what happened next is undeniable. A mediocre guitarist transformed almost overnight into a blues virtuoso whose influence would shape the future of music. Join us as we unravel the mysterious life of Robert Johnson, from his humble beginnings to his untimely death at 27. We'll explore how a man with only 29 recorded songs and 2 known photographs became a cornerstone of American music, influencing generations of artists from Eric Clapton to Led Zeppelin. Was it divine inspiration, relentless practice, or a supernatural bargain that created this legend? Prepare to journey into the heart of blues history, where fact and fiction blur, and the ghost of Robert Johnson still haunts every chord. This is the story of a deal with the devil that changed music forever. Born in 1911 to parents Julia Dodds and Noah Johnson in Hazelhurst, Mississippi, Johnson was the product of an extramarital affair between his mother, Julia Dodds, and a plantation worker named Noah Johnson. His childhood was tumultuous, with 3 different men serving as father figures before he reached the age of 7. Johnson spent his early years moving between Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas as his mother navigated difficult circumstances. Despite these challenges, it was during this period that Johnson first encountered the blues and began learning to play the harmonica and guitar. His mother had already given birth to 10 kids with her husband Charles, but Robert was born out of wedlock, illegitimately, and had a father who he most likely never met or spoke to. His stepfather Charles was a reasonably successful landowner, but after getting into a dispute with a lynch mob, he was forced to move to Memphis. Robert would eventually be sent there to live with him until he was around 8 or 9 years old. After moving back to Mississippi with his mother and stepfather, Dusty Willis, Robert Johnson developed an interest in music, learning guitar from his brother and excelling at harmonica. He was writing songs and singing during this time. But all of this wasn't very appealing to his new stepfather, who wanted him to work on the plantation fields. This would lead to a conflict between the two, and while he was still a teenager, Robert would try and find his own freedom and independence. On the 17th of February 1929, he married a 16-year-old Virginia Travis, but unfortunately, she would die a year later while giving birth. Robert was now a 20-year-old widow with a stepfather he didn't like, a father he never met, and a wife who had just passed away. Unless we forget, he was an African-American man living in the South in the early 20th century. Robert Johnson's childhood was marked by significant hardships that shaped him. As he grew into adulthood, he felt lost and hopeless, but music became his refuge, providing purpose and hope during turbulent times. This passion would later influence his legendary status in the blues genre. Around this time, the legendary blues icon Son House moved to a nearby town, and everything changed for Robert Johnson. Suddenly, this lost and impressionable young man found himself within earshot of one of the greatest blues artists of his generation. Every week, Robert would be at the local juke joint, mesmerized as Son House played live, pouring his soul into the music. Robert had some musical talent, primarily as a harmonica player, but was not yet skilled enough to stand out in the blues scene. His proximity to greatness inspired him, igniting a passion for music. Despite his enthusiasm, Son House described him as a poor guitarist, often asked to stop playing. This ridicule, combined with limited resources, may have motivated Johnson to leave and seek better opportunities to learn and grow as a musician. In 1931, he remarried but continued traveling the South for about a year. This is a confusing space of time that is responsible for many of the myths revolving around Johnson. Some believed Robert Johnson left to find his father, while others thought he sought musical improvement. The most captivating theory, however, was that he made a deal with the devil. This theory, though it sounded unbelievable, caught the attention of everyone and made his story even more mysterious. According to legend, Johnson visited a crossroads at midnight where the devil tuned his guitar, granting him extraordinary talent. This pact marked a turning point in his music career, but it also doomed his soul, foreshadowing his tragic early death. The reason people believe that this is what happened is because of a man named Liddell Johnson, who in 1971 said that this was the way to sell your soul, and that his brother Tommy had actually done this. There was no relation between Tommy and Robert. But that didn't stop people from taking this tale and attaching it to Robert's name. The story of Robert Johnson's transformation from a mediocre musician to a legendary guitarist is remarkable. One thing is almost certain. Between the years of 1930 and 1932, something happened that made Johnson go from being considered embarrassingly bad to one of the greatest guitarists of all time. When he finally returned to play for Son House, nobody was telling him to stop. He was so good, when he finished, all our mouths were standing open. Johnson took his new talents and began traveling with fellow artist Johnny Shines, where he improved his craft even further. But he still hadn't recorded anything, and his talents were being wasted. It was the mid-1930s, and his second wife had passed away. Johnson was determined to record and make a name for himself. He went into a man named H.C. Spears' store, who worked for the ARC record label. Finally, in November of 1936, Johnson was in a studio recording the first of his almost 30 songs. He would continuously return to record until the summer of 1937. His music had some dark undertones. Songs like Me and the Devil Blues, If I Had Possession Over Judgment Day, Hellhound on My Trail, and of course, Crossroad Blues. Dark themes like hell, the devil, and death were prominent in his music, and this did nothing but add fuel to his already dark image. Robert Johnson's dark lyrics epitomized blues themes, capturing struggles that resonated with many artists. His words, however, seemed to carry a unique weight, enhancing his legendary status. Tragically, after recording his influential songs, he died just a year later, leaving behind a limited discography. On the 16th of August, 1938, Robert Johnson, age 27, was found dead. Very little is known about the specifics of his untimely demise. In fact, the actual date he died wasn't discovered for another 30 years, when music journalist Gail Dean Wardlow found his death certificate. There was no official cause of death for Robert Johnson, leaving many questions unanswered. The most plausible, though less sensational theory, is that he died from untreated syphilis, a common issue in low-income families at the time. It's possible Johnson was a victim of this disease. Robert Johnson's life was full of mystery, and so was his death. One theory suggests he was murdered. While performing at a country dance, Johnson allegedly flirted with a married woman. Her jealous husband offered Johnson a drink, which fellow musician Sonny Boy Williamson warned him not to take. Ignoring the warning, Johnson angrily accepted a second drink from the husband and consumed it. Whether Robert Johnson was poisoned is still a mystery. Blues researcher Robert Mack McCormick claimed to have found Johnson's killer and even got a confession. However, he never revealed the person's name or the confession, which raised doubts and fueled rumors about Johnson's death. Johnson's life ended tragically at just 27, leaving many questions unanswered. His mysterious death added to his already enigmatic life. Many of his friends and peers didn't learn about his passing until much later, hearing the news through word of mouth. For nearly 20 years after his death, Johnson was almost forgotten. Then, in 1961, Columbia Records released King of the Delta Blues Singers, a collection of his music. This album brought his work to a larger audience and made him a blues legend, even though he didn't live to see it. Although some still believe in the myth that Johnson sold his soul to the devil, his real legacy is in his music. His short but powerful collection of songs changed blues forever and inspired musicians like Mick Jagger and Eric Clapton. Even after his death, Johnson won a Grammy and had his song Crossroad Blues inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Robert Johnson's life and death are wrapped in mystery, with myths and conspiracy theories blurring the lines between fact and fiction. Yet what remains indisputable is that Robert Johnson was and still is a legend.